Flail, Sickle, Scythe, and Peasant Staff. These 4 weapons are known to the wider HEMA community as Paulus Hector Mair's exotic weapons. Weird weapons we don't see in other manuals. Many think they were just included by Mair to flex with his book and therefore his wealth. But are they really that weird? I don't think so. Mair included all of them for one reason or another. Some he explained well, others rather poorly. Many think they were just included by Mair to flex with his book and therefore his wealth. I have made multiple videos on my channel about the threshing flail, and I don't think that it warrants a deeper discussion here. We have copper etchings depicting fencers with flails, as well as mentions of them being used as weapons by guardsmen, and of course their application in warfare. Flails also show up in the fencing manuals of other masters. With one weapon therefore already not falling under the category of exotic weapon, we have to focus on the 3 remaining ones: Sickle, Scythe, and Peasant Staff. Let's start with the Sickle. The Sickle part in Mair's manual gets misunderstood quite often. People like to think that Mair is talking about a fight between gentlemen here, a fair duel with sickles. But this is not the case. In his table of contents, Mair writes, "Now weapon versus weapon, when one is overtaken without warning or ambushed." Immediately afterwards he writes, in the same vein, the Sickle. So what do we see here? Mair is not talking about a fair fight 1 versus 1. He is talking about being ambushed, overtaken, and using whatever you got to defend yourself. I have said in a previous video that sickle fencing is a lot like dagger fencing, and that sickle and dagger overlap quite a lot. The sickle itself gives you the option to hook limbs, something which you do in dagger with the space between your dagger and arm. So while the sickle has an inherent hooking space, you create the same space with your dagger and arm. So we cannot really call this an exotic or weird weapon, as the sickle might as well have been any other tool you've got at hand. The Peasant Staff is also a relatively clear-cut case. Mair writes that the Peasant Staff is included as another weapon you use in an emergency, a stick you pick up from the ground to defend yourself with, something you can just bash the other party with. Also, I would refer to the later baton to show that this weapon is not as weird as you might think. Now to the last weapon, the Scythe. This one is tricky. Mair doesn't say much about it. All he says is that the old ones had an art of fencing with the scythe. Who were the old ones? We do not know. Mair was a collector of weapons. Maybe he mistook a Dacian falx for a scythe and therefore meant the Dacians with the old ones. Of course, one naturally could think of the peasants during the Peasant War. However, if that is the case, Mair would have only gathered that from stories, as the use of repurposed tools as weapons is much over-exaggerated. Nonetheless, this leads us into another theory, that being that he misunderstood the war scythe for just a regular scythe. Decades after the Peasant Wars, war scythes having scythe or scythe-like blades mounted upwards like a regular polearm could have been misunderstood for regular scythes. The last option could of course be that the old ones are whoever wrote the manual that he copied the scythe part from. The scythe is therefore the only weapon that I, as a modern person, would classify as weird. To Mair it most likely wasn't, and maybe with some research it won't be to us either. Mair's goal was to create a compendium of fencing techniques, a complete collection of almost every fencing weapon that existed. The ability to flex with this book does not come from the weapons included, but from the artwork, the expensive materials used for it, and for the vast armored section, as armored combat was apparently one of Mair's favorite things. To him, this book was a serious endeavor, and we should treat it as such. If you have any more questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. We love talking about everything Paulus Hector Mair and historical fencing. Thank you.